Hello, guys. Welcome to the Brains and Needles podcast. On today's podcast, I have Siddharth Oak, who's my colleague. He's also studying in the university where I completed my med school. He's in the last year of med school. So, Siddharth, what are you going to discuss with us today?
So today we are going to discuss about, I would like to discuss about bipolar disorder, and we would also like to start with mental health awareness because, I feel that this is one of the most important things that a young doctor or any person in this current day and age should be aware of, because there's a lot of stigma attached to mental health as it is. Like, for example, in our countries, if you have, for example, depression, your parents are
Our
more likely.
country, as in like the
Okay.
subcontinent, right? You mean the
Yeah,
subcontinent?
for example, in India, that's
Uh-huh.
right.
Uh-huh.
So, in India, or even you can say Africa, parents are more likely to give you a whooping just so that they'll be like, I'll whack depression out of you. But that doesn't really work, right?
Yeah, no, in the subcontinent, having a depressive or a mental health issue, it's itself a burden onto the patient or the guy or the girl because they have to face the society, and the society is like, you know yeah, just get over it. But if you have cancer or diabetes, people won't tell you, just get over it. So I think we should address and spread the knowledge about mental health issues more often and discuss it more often. That's why we're having this discussion on a podcast. Um,
I think it's also, important thing that you can easily understand, right? That um, some people have a more progressive attitude towards mental health and some people don't.
yeah. So like many people, they think they have some mental disorder just because they have seen it in a movie or their pal or their very own
Yeah.
friend or a sister has it, or so they cannot distinguish. So one of such disorders is bipolar disorder, which you're going to discuss. So can you just start with whatever, like?
Okay, so what is bipolar disorder, right? So, all right, so what is bipolar, right? So, bipolar previously used to be termed manic depressive disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So, this actually is a very apt definition for this disease, actually, because bipolar disorder does consist of two polarities of either depression or hypermania, or manic episodes, basically, when you're feeling too good about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, now the disorder itself can be classified into two categories according to American classification, which is bipolar 1 and 2.
So let's concentrate on, like, we'll just talk about bipolar 1 and then followed by bipolar 2, and then I have other 2 3 types which I have I came across, so we'll talk about that. So, and then in the end I have a case to discuss, so I think that people listening to us can relate to it. So what is bipolar 1? So bipolar disorder is like a manic disorder, if I'm not wrong, like, yes. It's
So
sort of.
bipolar 1 is is a disorder in which a patient in his entire lifetime, right? If he has one manic episode, then this patient is bipolar 1. So now what does it mean, mania, right? So mania is hyperactivity or hyper energetic expression of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So now manic episode is like almost psychosis, and this patient had to be admitted for this mania.
So how does a layman differentiate? Because even we are super excited for some times. Like for me, I watch football. Someone like I'm excited for the football match itself, or I'm excited to make a podcast.
Okay, but
So how do you differentiate? Can you tell me what is mania in itself? Like mania.
okay, so for you, right? Because you said about football. Let me ask you a question, right? During the World Cup matches, sometimes the World Cup matches are really late at night,
Yeah.
right? And you stay awake, but sometimes you just fall asleep, right? Because you're just too tired, and it's
Yes.
really bad timing.
Yeah.
But now, this patient with bipolar disorder, right? He will experience insomnia when he's so super excited about it and super hyped about it that he can't sleep at all because of it.
Yeah, okay. So it's like compulsion to, it's not even compulsion. The patient doesn't even know why he's.
Yeah, any emotion, if you just magnify it, that is mania.
Okay. So let's say, like, I heard an anecdote where a person was in his 40s and had this mania attack for about 2 to 8 months, where he was in a super mania state. he had his life savings, which he tried to gamble off. He had a nice wife. He divorced her, and he was at a high position in a company. He left that, and he became very hypersexual, irritative,
Yeah.
and like you said, he was always on a on switch, and you don't think it to be a disorder when you're happy. Am I right? Like if you're happy,
True,
why
a patient
would
is not going to go to a doctor because he's feeling overly energetic, unless. But there is some cases in which the patient will consult a doctor. In these cases as well, like for example, in scenario like you said, when the patient just, like he just had a divorce, he had a big life change, all of a sudden, then he's gambling all his savings away. So now the patient will consult a doctor because he's like, okay, I know I don't know why, but I feel too sure of myself right now.
And is there a contradiction to its own personality as also, like, because if a person who's sane enough wouldn't gamble his life saving, right?
Exactly,
So-
it would not. Because at this point, right, like when you have maniac, like when you feel mania, right, at this, like you can just say that you have so much positive thinking that you think whatever you think is gonna happen.
Is there also a feeling of grandeur where you
Yeah,
think
grandiosity, yes.
so? There's grandeur, there's hyperactivity, there's spending of money, irrational decisions, and let's say hypersexuality. Did we point it out? Hypersexuality. So the
Actually,
patient has
like-
multiple partners, and
Yeah, during manic, like think manic people
Yeah.
will actually have more than like a lot of partners because at that point they're really like really good talkers. Like a person who is manic, right? If you listen to him, he's super engrossed in his things.
So you think he's on to some drugs, right? You'll ask him, right? Definitely, like, are you on some drugs? Like, even jokingly, because you'll see that person and they were too excited.
Yeah, if you then for like, I think you would rather say maybe he's drunk because like imagine when you're drunk, right? You just start talking so much.
Blabbering,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Like if you do that, right, then that is a manic period. Like that is a kind of a mania.
Okay.
So what you basically see in mania is like inflated self-esteem, like you said, grandiosity. The person becomes more talkative than usual. Like so many things are just moving around in their mind, like ooh, bird, ooh, this thing, ooh,
Okay.
curtain, like that.
Yeah. So let's put a graph across. Listeners, if you're sitting, just sit with a pen and a paper. I know it's very cliche of me saying it, but sit with a pen and a paper and draw a mid line and a line above it and a line below it. So for bipolar 1, okay, now start the line from the point A and then go up, go up, go up, and mark that point as mania. And now, after you go up, bring that line, bring that graph down, 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 until a point below the midline. Go down, and up till the end. Mark that point as depressive state. So in bipolar 1, what happens is the patient will have an episode of mania for a longer period of time, say from weeks to months. Let's say from 2 to 8 months, the patient is hyperactive, everything is in a euphoric state, and is hypersexual, spending a lot of money, buying this, buying cars, doing investments, going into share market,
Basically, his mania is really pronounced.
Okay,
Like-
so let's say, so you mark that point, you mark the time period, okay, that's done. After that, suddenly the patient goes into the depressive state, which is the point below the midline or way below the midline. Just mark the symptoms now. Now the patient is contemplating about the decisions he took earlier. Why did I spend money? Now, can you just throw on some things about the depressive part of it, like?
So the depressive episodes in major depressive disorder, like, is considered like at least 2 consecutive weeks of the depressive episode. symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So what you see is sleep changes, appetite changes, loss of interest, fatigue, excessive sluggishness, like you don't want to do anything, you can't concentrate, you want to kill yourself, something like that.
But this kind of depression in bipolar 1 is not a major depression, right? It's like a lower grade of depression.
No, so in bipolar 1 and 2, both the depressive episodes can be either severe or not so severe. It depends on the patient.
Okay. So now in depression, what he's doing, he's having appetite change, maybe a overeater, or
or
will not eat.
Yeah.
And you know, I have a little anecdote where I came across, I don't know if that person had bipolar. In India, I came across there where, I didn't know, but he had some mental illness, where the person was very happy about losing weight. But when in anamnesis, we came to know that the person is not having food for many days and not sleeping as well prior to that. And so in depressive state, the patient doesn't want to bathe, want to brush, doesn't want to walk.
Yeah,
as well.
basically there's like no motivation to do anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly, because like you can see that it is like, imagine you're a person, he's conserving his energy, right? And he's going through depression. At this point, all of his energy is in him.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's so much energy collected at one point and he just has to burst it out.
Oh, so that's
So that is
potential
mania.
energy
Yeah.
going up to the threshold and
Yes,
then
exactly, and then
coming
you
to
have
the
mania.
kinetic energy, which is the meaning.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. So now, I'll give I'll repeat what is so bipolar 1. So bipolar 1, you'll have manic disorder where you have a period of 2 to 8 months, and you mark this point at the top of the graph where the graph goes gradually up over the months. So
Yeah.
you'll be hyperactive, hypersexual, irrational, not sleeping, high adrenaline rush, insomnia, and then and what else, grandeur, feeling of grandeur,
Yeah,
having vague ideas about things.
true. Or it is actually when you can't say they have vague ideas, because when you discuss about vague ideas, you kind of go into dissociation.
Okay.
And dissociation is more towards schizophrenia. And-
Yeah, that. But like I came across this case on the net where the person was telling something very different than usual. He was asking his friend to do this, do that, and the person felt as if the person is the center of attraction. Like whatever he's doing is so important.
I can give you an example of like patient interaction that I saw online. So this lady, she comes in and she is so excited about her new hobby. She started to grow plants in her house.
Okay.
And she's all over about it up to with the doctor, and she's telling him that, wow, I brought so many plants, I'm looking after them and everything. So the doctor is like, okay, when did you buy them? She was like, I bought them yesterday night. He's like, what made you buy them yesterday night? She's like, nothing, I just felt like it. So that is kind of what a bipolar person will be acting out like.
Okay. So now let's jump to the second type. What is bipolar 2?
Yeah, but then before we do that,
Okay.
I think one thing that you need to like make sure that everyone knows is that bipolar 1 has to have one manic episode in their life, Karochi, anytime.
Okay.
So
For the people who are not in Russia, Karachi, like you should have one manic episode. Like put an asterisk over it, having one manic episode at least in bipolar 1.
Yeah.
So now we jump to bipolar 2. Yes.
yes, so bipolar 2 is hypomania.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have such extreme symptoms of mania where like this person was jumping up and down. This person is more like skipping.
Okay.
So he's like more like hopping, he's not.
So he's my favorite word is he's subtly happy or
Yeah,
subtly
exactly.
maniac.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like he's on the down low, he's playing it cool.
Mm-hmm.
But and the depressive part is the same as bipolar 1.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that the patient with bipolar 1 is going to be most of the times is going to be okay. If you draw a pie diagram, right? If you draw two pie diagrams and make two circles, so in considering circle 1 is bipolar, if you divide this in half,
Okay.
this 50% is patients with like these patients 50% of the time are symptom free.
Okay.
So they don't have any symptoms.
asymptomatic.
Yeah. And then you have like 15 to 25% of the time they have mania,
Oh.
and the rest is depression.
Okay, so listen, you will be feeling like a fool because this
Yeah.
is an audio thing, but like try to, jot whatever he's trying or I'm trying to say. So on the graph, first we, had a graph where one mark this graph, the second line with another color. So you'll have the graph starting and reach the point just below the manic phase and mark it.
Yeah, like,
And now, in the depressive phase, it's too depressive, right? Like depressive phase is the same. Like it's go.
yeah, it'll be like the bipolar one. So like how you do for bipolar one is the same for
the depressive part, like
yeah.
the graph for depression. Okay. So in bipolar 2, the graph goes up, but not too high. So it's hypomania state. Mark that as hypomania. And depressive state is like you go down, like depressive state, depressive. So how do you distinguish between 1 and 2?
So now bipolar 2, right? This is actually one of the most misdiagnosed diseases, I think, because most people with bipolar 2 will first feel depression, and since the mania is not so high as to be noticeable, you won't notice the mania. So they will think that
the dominant part is depression in bipolar 2.
Yeah, exactly. So these people will seek help for depression. Now the psychiatrist may or may not think about bipolar disorder.
Oh.
Okay, so like if mostly they won't.
And I think they'll start treating the depression.
Like just the depression. And now
for years, right?
Yeah, and now the bipolar depression is refractory to normal treatment of depression.
Yeah, okay.
So it is basically you're giving tablets for nothing. Yeah.
So
it's not gonna happen. Nothing is gonna happen.
So basically treating another disease.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is more often because now the symptoms you mentioned, like just as a joke, like many of these things are me. Like I'm so hyperactive at times, and let's do this, let's do that. But there's a distinction between what I'm happy about and then my normal behavior. It doesn't escalate up to going to gambling or doing idiotic stuff. Not idiotic, but you're in a mania. If
I understand.
If you put quotes over it, like it's mania. So you're going to do manic things like a maniac. So
okay, so like what you can say is that if you feel like you're on top of the world for at least 4 days, yeah, you should go seek a doctor. And like if you feel on top of the world for 4 days, right, and then you feel depressed or you feel very bad, yeah, that is the time you should go to a doctor, because you have like polarity in you.
Okay, so that's why bipolar, like
yes, exactly.
your poles apart at times.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so and then the same symptoms as well in hypomania and the depressive state.
Yeah, same symptoms, but hypomania is just like reduced mania symptoms. You won't really notice the patient has hypomania, because it will just most probably be seen as insomnia or just like the patient suddenly is active. That's it. And the thing about these things is that the patient themselves get addicted to the manic part. Imagine like you're so depressed, like all the time you feel so bad, and then just that one time you're gonna feel super good.
Oh, so this is about bipolar in general or bipolar?
This is bipolar in general.
Okay.
So that is why the patients are actively seeking the mania part.
Oh.
So which is the main reason why during treatment we concentrate on mood stabilizers.
So if I will put in an abbreviation, so in bipolar 1 it's MD. You go from mania to depression. In bipolar 2 it's DM. You go from depressive state to the hypomania state.
Yeah, more like
if
something like that. Yes.
Okay, so guys, now you have two graphs. The first graph where for bipolar 1 where it goes high up to mania and then comes out to the depressive state after the mania part phase is over. In bipolar 2 you start with the depressive part and then you go to the hypomania state, and you might be oscillating between them once. The third type, which is known as rapid cycling, it's very hard to diagnose. In this you'll have 4 episodes of not mania or too depressive state, but a hypomania state and a depression which is not that to depressive state, like you're depressed but not to that extent. So if you'll have these episodes 4 times in a year, or there's, as the name rapid cycling. You can have ultra rapid cycling episodes where in the morning, or
Yeah,
you,
you're
you
feeling
have.
very high, and then the evening you suddenly become depressed.
But how do you distinguish this with mood swings? How it is different from mood swings?
Actually, bipolar disorder is considered mood swing disorder. That is why the mainstay therapy of bipolar maintenance is mood stabilizers to keep
But
you on
everyone, like in our university, because we are medical students and we are out of our country, we have mood swings, like where we have like we're very like, in the class we have had a very bad day. Teacher says something we cannot diagnose.
exactly.
So we have a bad mood. We come home and we're very good. So it is.
No, that is not the thing, because depression is something which is like extremely low
everything is down.
ideation. Yeah.
Okay.
So like you feel really bad about yourself.
Okay. I'm just feeling bad in the class. That's not.
No,
You
that's
feel
not it.
depressed. Like
Exactly. Like there's no motivation to do anything. You feel like
leave
what
it.
is the point?
Ah.
What am I even living for? So mostly you see depressive patients, like what they do is like there is a cycle you can actually
So
see.
is there any suicidal tendencies in any of the 2, 3?
So in bipolar disorder, yes, there is like a very high tendency of suicide compared to unipolar depression or compared to just normal lifestyle.
So guys, unipolar depression is one where you just have depressive state, or a depressive.
Yeah, it's like when you're just depressed, that is unipolar depression.
So I would like to state something like if any one of your friends or someone who's having bipolar disorder ever mentions to you like he or she feels like attempting a suicide, you should immediately consult a doctor, and you should mention that, because
Yeah, and you should at least listen to them, and first main thing is don't leave them. Like if a person is discussing about this, don't leave them, be at their side. That is the main thing. You need to wait at least for that 1 or 2 hours to pass by until they feel different. Because the moment you leave, right, is the moment they're at risk.
Okay. So, and also, as I was mentioning in the start, like whenever we see people with mental illness, in this case bipolar, we'll say, leave it, you'll get over it. But whereas if you have some other disease or any concomitant disease like let's say diabetes or a cancer, that time you can't tell. You don't tell. I don't see you tell. Just get over it. Just cancer. But when you talk about mental health, people just get over it. You'll be okay.
Because
so this time you should just listen and try to help them get out of it. Like let's do something when they're depressed or.
I think it is a prognostic stigma that we have attached to a mental disorder, because prognostically mental disorders are okay. You're not gonna classify the patient as critical. So it is not really an emergent situation. While on the other hand, a cancer or something like that, as soon as it reaches a particular stage, it is beyond treatment, and it is going to kill the patient. So the prognosis is poor. So that is why I think they receive more
empathy or sympathy.
Yeah, exactly.
So like we talked about bipolar 1, 2 and cyclothymia. Now there's no, we didn't talk about cyclothymia. We talked about rapid cycling. Cyclothymia is one where you have oscillating bipolar thing, where you have a state of hypomania and mild depression. So it's the patient is oscillating over the month.
So like every other week he is going up and down.
So if you want to make a graph about this, just put like how a voice frequency is. It just go up, like you'll have like a crescendo, decrescendo type of thing. Like goes up, down, goes
like a cardiologist.
yeah. So you'll have such thing, and so we have this 4 disorders like 1, 2, rapid cycling, cyclothymia, and so what are the triggers like? Can you tell me what are the triggers? Like again, like if you
triggers of. Okay, so I think there is a lot of different triggers, but because there's psychosocial triggers, there is just environmental triggers, and sometimes there is just your body triggers. Like for example, in women who have like menstruation, right, because of that different hormonal imbalances, you are more predisposed to some things.
But this is not, this disorder basically is not, you don't have a good etiological proof for it, right?
No, it is a very strongly genetically linked disorder. So
But I think it is not proven yet, like the X-linked inheritance of it, like.
yeah, it is not complete. It is like when you say there is inheritance, right? So there is the part of inheritance where it is this, like it goes through, right? But only some people in the family get it. I actually forgot what it's called, but it is part of inheritance. Like if you study biology, right, it's there.
Yeah, you do. Any medical students, you can write us on our email.
Yeah, you can maybe write this. And
We're also
let
going
us
to
know as
have,
well.
like one of our team members will make quizzes, so you can go to our Instagram page and answer them after listening to the podcast. So now triggers, like I would like to add, like having a fight with your friend, and then you like, or losing someone you like, or having a losing your wife, and they're like, no, I am going to enjoy my life, and they don't know when the bar is or the line is crossed, and then there's a mania state, or going into a depressive state, and they don't realize they have been depressed over time. About it.
So the thing about these people is like the mania and depression is very closely linked, in the sense that, for example, during a manic episode, I'm like, I hate you, Omkar. I don't want to even be with you. So I just run away.
That is so many people.
And
Okay.
now the next, and then the next day, I'm like, oh God, what did I say? Like, he did not even bother me that much. I just did it because of no reason.
No,
So now you're just beating yourself up again.
That is
So that is how it is like closely linked. Like, so that is why I would not say that it has triggers, because the patient is continuously cycling. Like it is not just his psyche which is cycling, it is also the neurotransmitters and different hormones which are also cycling.
So then again, I also want to discuss something like nowadays I see a lot of younger guys. Okay, it is good the social media, the actresses, like the public personalities are talking about mental health issues, and bringing this. This is a nice thing. But at the same time, I've seen many people just because it's there, they think like they have these. So instead of, and this thinking makes them depressive, not the happy, but I've seen many people go into depression just because they have seen something or seen the public figure going into depression. So
I think it's like at this point of time they should just go visit a psychiatrist
to get sure, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't have such.
because, like, I personally believe that even a healthy mental state person, with a person who has a complete healthy mental state, he should also visit a psychiatrist or psychotherapist. Because
like just like how you should visit
because
a
you actually
dentist.
do learn
Yeah.
a lot of things from a psychotherapist, because sometimes the questions they ask you are questions which you also kind of forget to ask yourself. Like, for example, right, like when you're angry at something, and you question, like, you never question yourself, why are you angry? What pissed you off about that thing? And
Like if he was Suits, in that Louis Litt has his psychiatrist who tells him why you angry, and then that's the time he contemplates. Like,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
So yeah, we should visit a psychiatrist. But then the money issue comes in. I'll go bankrupt if I they charge so much.
I mean, I think
They
that
charge-
one session is alright. One session
But-
just costs like 1,000
It was
rupees.
just a joke, but I've known many. Now there are many institutes or many groups coming up where they offer free a toll number to talk about your state, about your depression or this disorder, and they give you number of psychiatrist. So you should firstly go to a therapist, and then
Yeah, I think
that might
normal,
he
yes.
might guide you through a psychiatrist. Go to
Exactly,
the
it
right
is.
way, and don't search a symptom on the internet. Of course, even listening to the podcast, you have a general idea of how it goes, but it is not a definitive thing where you can, because we have not met you or to diagnose you. We don't know your history. So just go to a psychiatrist to get your diagnosis well.
Yeah, and it's
checked.
always like a stitch in time saves 9, right?
Yeah.
So, alright, if you're thinking that you already have something, don't worry. Go check it out. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. It is. For me, I also visit a psychotherapist. It is very nice, and I think it keeps me mentally stable as well.
Okay, that's nice. Once I have a bank balance at Siddharth, I'll go and visit her. Just joking. No, now let's come to the treatment. So there are many drugs. Although we mentioned that drug the the effect of drug may differ from person to person. So there's a combination of one mood stabilizing drug and antipsychotic drug. So basically,
So
can you
like
go
I
with
think
yeah,
before we go into the actual
drugs?
classification of drugs, it is easier if we divide the disease progress.
So,
So
do you want them to make something like a timeline of a chronology?
no need. It's like think about it like okay, there is acute symptoms and there is not so acute symptoms like subacute, and then there is chronic where you have sometimes no symptoms. Like I mentioned before, sometimes bipolar patients have no symptoms from 50% of the time.
Asymptomatic in
Exactly.
bipolar 2, right?
Bipolar 1 and 2, like
Okay.
it's just around 50% in both. So now there's specific drugs which can target the acute situation. So what is an acute situation in bipolar disorder? First is manic episode.
Okay.
Manic episode leading to psychosis and leading to hospitalization.
Okay. Over months, like.
Yeah, no, like not over months. It can happen within days. And then excessive depression, maybe suicide attempt. So all of these are considered acute
Okay.
phase. And then you have the maintenance therapy, which is to maintain, if you change, okay, after acute stage, right, you use some drugs to prolong the effect of the acute
So
stage.
you want to be in remission or recovery
Exactly.
phase, right?
Right.
So that it doesn't exacerbate like any other disease.
Exactly, it doesn't go down again, that's what. Like it doesn't become acute again. Like, so to maintain that. So that is the maintenance therapy. Now we can, like, there is a lot of drugs which are FDA approved and which are not FDA approved. So the thing about these drugs is that there's not a lot of research, and unfortunately some things are refractory to treatment. Like for example, acute depression in bipolar is actually very hard to treat. They have combination of TCAs and SSRIs, but it doesn't really work that well. And some of the agents, like the biggest problem with the therapy of bipolar disorder, right, is the side effects. The side effects of the drugs are too much. Like for example, lithium used to be mainstay therapy of
The lithium salts.
exactly. It used to be mainstay therapy for acute mania and acute any longer term maintenance of bipolar disorder. But lithium causes tremors.
Yeah.
So now you have to think a lot about these things, like because there's too many things which can discourage a patient from keeping on with the treatment. You don't want the patient off the treatment, because off the treatment they're gonna go down. So you have to maintain on the therapy, and while maintaining you have to explain the side effects properly. So I think that is one of the biggest things that you should think about, is like the way you explain to the patient what is going on.
And what if the patient is there's no compliance with the drug, like they don't want to take it or they forget it? Will they again go back to exacerbation?
Yes, they will in time, because it is a genetic disorder. You cannot really classify it as a psychiatric, just plain psychiatric disorder. It is not just that.
So you want to always be in a recovery or a remission phase,
Yeah,
or
like-
be on a straight line, like be a normal
Exactly.
person.
Like, because think about it, you don't want to be like, who would want to be continuously oscillating between either too happy and either too bad?
So like we, according to like so we'll give 4-5 names, because there's so many names associated. Like firstly, it's lithium and valproic acid, which is given, which I also mentioned in our story before putting the podcast. Which by the way, a short anecdote, Siddharth follows brains and needles, and I put up this story, and he was the only one who understood what I put, and he said these are the drugs for bipolar. So that's the time, that was a bait for me, and I just like, okay, are you doing the podcast with me? And he was very shy about it. Now he's speaking very well, and that's how he's there collaborating with me. I hope he's very good in cardiology. I hope he'll do some cardiology podcasts individually and send us. So yeah, this is what
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yes. So now the treatment, so combination of one mood stabilizing drug and antipsychotic drug. So you have lithium carbonate, valproic acid. You have anti-epileptic drugs like gabapentin.
Yeah, so
Carbo-
sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
you.
yeah, no problem.
So lithium and valproic acid, right? These drugs are used for, especially during acute mania
Yeah,
psychosis.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
this is like psychosis of bipolar disorder.
And then for acute depression, you have olanzapine and combination of fluoxetine combination. So you give this drug together, and then you have these are antipsychotic drugs, by the way. So you have an antipsychotic drug and an anti-epileptic drug given together. And then long term, you again have lithium is always present, right, in the picture, like.
So lithium, it depends on patient compliance. Like if the patient has side effects, because lithium, with some patients gives no side effects, and with some patients gives excessive side effects.
Okay.
So it depends.
So long term, you can have
Yeah,
risperidone,
yeah.
lithium, olanzapine, or
So right now, like the like one of the biggest things that they are working on is Lamotrigine. It is something that they're studying as well for
It's an
maintenance.
anti-epileptic drug.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was just like most of these drugs were just recently approved.
Okay.
Like once in the 2000s, what happened was that there was a sudden FDA approval of a lot of antipsychotic drugs, and so these things, lamotrigine, all of these, olanzapine and risperidone, all of these drugs were actually given or approved by the FDA in the same periods, like 2000s. So we don't actually have that much research on the drugs if you really think about it. And unfortunately, there's some things of the disease which we cannot stop.
Okay. So yeah. So that's all. You want anything to discuss, or you want to give a short?
Yeah. I just wanted to say this one last thing about the caregiver burden of bipolar depression.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it. So
like a patient who has bipolar disorder, who is like your family member, mostly he oscillates between depression and mania so many times, and his depression is so severe that you as a caregiver are affected by it too much.
Yeah, you tend to get frustrated or depressed over time as well, like the caretaker, like the the caregiver.
To the point that they become clinically depressed, and they themselves also start attempting suicide. This can also happen.
Okay, so I think what I suggest from this, what I've known now, or I've known over the years, is like you should go together with the patient as well to the psychiatrist, and so that the psychiatrist also understand your psychosis while you are with the patient.
Yeah, I think the most important thing during this thing is that the caregivers learn to give time to themselves as well, because
they understand their misery, right?
Like it's like you can't be sympathetic to someone 100% of the time.
Yeah, of
because
course.
If you're being sympathetic 100% of the time, right, over a period of time, you're gonna get exhausted. And now when the patient really, really needs your help, you're gonna be there but completely exhausted of your sympathy. So you don't have sympathy for yourself at this point. You can't really give it for the patient as well.
Okay. So
it doesn't help either of them. It's best if you relax, take a time, live your life as well, because you also have your rights.
So in the end, I would like to say, take care of your mental health. It is a thing which you should address as well. And so Siddharth, can you give a gist of whatever we talked? Like bipolar 1, it has manic phase followed by a depressive state.
Yeah. So bipolar 1, just remember this:
manic
phase, mania, and depression. That's all.
MD, the abbreviation we used. Okay.
Yes, and with bipolar 2, hypomania and depression.
Or depression first or hypomania.
Yes.
So it's not mania, it's hypomania.
It's hypomania, yeah.
And then we have this cyclothymia, which is oscillations between hypomania and hypodepressive state. And then we have cycling, I forgot. Oh my god.
Cyclothymia.
No, I mentioned that. Oh my god, what's wrong? Oh, rapid cycling. So rapid cycling, where you have the frequency of mood changes is more, and that even there you have oscillation between hypomania and hypodepression. So that's all. If you like this podcast with Siddharth, let us know. If you want more podcast with Siddharth or have Siddharth with us on the podcast for the cardiac diseases, because I apparently came to know from many people he's very good at it. He's laughing. He's on a grandiose state. No, just kidding. So just follow us on Instagram at the rate of Brains and Needles, on Facebook as well, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Brains and Needles. Write into us if you like this podcast. Thank you. That's all.
Thank Okay, thank you for having me too, but
How was your experience? Like,
I loved it. It was fun, and me too. I learned a lot. It was nice.
Okay.
Thank you.